Um, as I sort of explained in the letter that went out about a week or two ago, a couple weeks ago now, I guess, basically what I'm going to do is just sort of facilitate the discussion using the timeline. We did this on Sunday. I thought it went pretty well, actually. And y'all will have the benefit of having some notes already written on the timeline from the Sunday group. You can choose to ignore them or not. Some of you who are here tonight were here on Sunday, so you can kind of chime in. You get different people in a room, you'll hear different stories, different perspectives, and that's part of the point of doing this event, to be perfectly honest, is to get those different perspectives out there. So as a system, as a congregation, as a whole, y'all can kind of move forward. You know what I mean? And not get kind of stuck in the past, or however you want to put it, but to sort of say, okay, this is where we've been, and now what can we together move forward with? That makes sense? I'll explain that a little more after I do a quick, like 5-minute devotion. And so that's pretty much how it'll go tonight. Conversation kind of free-flowing, chime in, raise your hand, speak up, whatever, and we'll just kind of go through the last 30 or so years. Any questions? There are no right or wrong answers to this, of course. Just, sort of your perspectives on the history of the place and how St. Luke's has kind of mattered in your life and where it's been. All right, let me find my Bible, and I will get us started. And feel free to move around if y'all want. Feel free to get up and get some more food, especially if there's dessert, if you haven't had any of the dessert yet. Okay. So, as I thought about this event, I thought, well, okay, what would be a good scriptural text to put it in context, to help us think spiritually about the past, and how do we move into the future? Okay, because that's what this is about, right? It's transition, pastoral transition. Society's changing, everything's changing. How is the church going to matter for the next 10 years, 20 years? Right? I know people worry about this kind of stuff because I hear about it all the time. So my question again is, well, okay, how can we sort of think, what kind of wisdom can we draw from the tradition in order to move forward? So this is from Matthew 13. Jesus has been giving a whole bunch of parables to kind of explain what the kingdom of heaven is like, and let me begin. Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which someone found and hid. Then in his joy he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field." Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. On finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was thrown into the sea and caught fish of every kind. When it was full, they drew to shore, sat down, and put the good into baskets, but threw out the bad. So it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come out and separate the evil from the righteous and throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Have you understood all this? The disciples answered, "Yes." And he said to them, "Therefore, every scribe who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven is like the master of a household, who brings out of his treasure what is new and what is old." When Jesus had finished these parables, he left that place. So a couple things I just want to kind of pull out about these parables. Within your history are treasures hidden in a field. Within your spiritual life, there are treasures hidden in a field, right? You've gone through life. Something about Christ, God, the Spirit, the gospel, whatever, touches you, And it matters. And so you give of yourself in order to have that treasure hidden in a field. Does that make sense? Now, Jesus says, whoever found the treasure sold everything they had and bought the field. Now, I don't expect any of you to have sold everything you had for the sake of St. Luke's. Right? But you've given of your time, your tithes, your energy, a Saturday afternoon in the summertime for June Fest, a week, maybe vacation, going on a mission trip, right? Serving on a committee, taking time out to talk to someone, to listen to someone. Why? Why would you give yourself like that? Because there's something about here, something about y'all, something about the church that matters that you would do that for. Like nothing else. Or, here's another example. People, in spite of the fact that church attendance has been declining for decades, people are still searching for that fine pearl. And we as the church, how are we doing? Saying, hey, those of you out there searching for a fine pearl, we have one here. We have what you're looking for here. So again, you're here because, I'm preaching to the choir, you're here because you found that pearl, something you wouldn't find anywhere else. Does that make sense? Would you agree with that? Yes. For the most part. Okay, then the next parable, the kingdom of heaven is like a drag net. A fisherman, throw a big net in the sea, and what do you get? You get urchins, and, maybe some good fish, maybe some bad fish, some stuff you wouldn't touch, right? In your history is good and bad. Jesus talks about, that's what the kingdom of heaven's like. It's a mixed bag. Right? And so you're going to keep the good and take out the bad. Now we can't be quick to judge about what's good and bad. Notice in the parable it's the angels who do the separating, not us. Y'all catch that? And so then Jesus finishes it off by saying, okay then, great, y'all get it? We're like, yeah, we get it. Well, we sort of get it. Do we get it? And Jesus is like, if you get it, then great. You're like the master of a household, taking out of the treasure house, the treasure, what is old and what is new. There are treasures old and new in your heritage. Which ones are you going to take out of your heritage, the old and the new, and carry forward into 2022, 2025, 2030? Because something that might have been awesome in 1985, which isn't even on the timeline, isn't going to make a whole lot of sense 35 years later. Does that make sense? Y'all with me on that? Alright, so the purpose of this really is to give y'all a chance to look back in the midst of transition on your past. What are your treasures, old and new? How can this motivate you for your future? What motivated you in the past? Why is this place important, again, for the future? Because your next pastor is going to ask. They're going to want to know. They're going to walk in the door, they're going to say, okay, well, tell me about St. Luke's. And what are they going to hear? They're going to ask. Maybe they might ask, well, okay, what are your treasures old and new? Now, wouldn't that be an interesting interview question? For a pastor to ask a call committee or a church council. Because that's where your mission starts. With the treasures old and new that God's given you. That make sense? Y'all with me? Alright. So let's pray. And then we'll get started. I'll get some water and finish eating my strawberry. And y'all can move around. Can y'all hear me in the back? Mm-hmm. Alright, I'm going to try to project. Just to project. Can you hear me, Nicole? Alright, I got a thumbs up. Unfortunately, we do have someone on Zoom. Nicole, you probably won't be able to see the timeline unless Smokey holds the laptop up and gets like this. Alright, which Smokey might do. Alright. And at the very least, maybe show them the crowd that is here. And anyway, the Greers are on Zoom. So hi, Greers.
Hi, Greers.
They're enjoying strep throat from what we understand.
Yeah, did y'all hear everybody? Can
That's
y'all
not a HIPAA violation.
say hi?
Hi.
All right, there we go. All right. All right, so let's pray. The Lord be with you. Gracious Heavenly God, we give you thanks for this evening. We give you thanks for all those ways in which you have worked in our lives. And we ask and pray that we might take that heritage, take those parts of our past and draw upon them, especially as we go through change. May those treasures old and new inspire us to make the most out of the life you have given us, to serve others, to share your good news, to love our neighbors, and especially, O God, to be the light that you would have us be. In your name we pray. Amen. All right. Feel free to move around, y'all, because it might be hard to see way back there. You don't have to. Y'all are good Lutherans, sitting in the back. Who remembers 1987? Don't everyone chime in at the same time. We started with 87, because that's when the fellowship hall was built. How many of y'all remember when the fellowship hall was built? Okay. How did that come about? Whose idea? Why? Why then? What was it about 1987 that prompted y'all to build a fellowship hall?
You needed more Sunday school space.
Needed more Sunday school space.
No,
Okay.
They needed a volleyball court.
Someone mentioned that on Sunday because there's lines on the floor. And basketball?
Yes, basketball.
I was here Sunday.
Oh my gosh. What's your name?
Mary.
Mary. Thank you, Mary. So needed more Sunday school space. How did this get used as Sunday school space? And why build a fellowship hall as opposed to like a Sunday school wing? I mean, y'all eventually did build a Sunday school wing, but how did this space get utilized?
So, yeah, so what is the fellowship hall now? Used to be on the other side of the kitchen. That was a big open space.
Huh.
And in 1987, what we did is we made classrooms in there, and we still needed a place for the turkey supper because God forbid that go away. So we built the fellowship hall for that, and it was also built with the understanding that this building would have air conditioning and we could do summer worship in here and not die in the other building with no air conditioning.
When did the other building get air conditioning?
I'm going to say that was in the like mid-90s to late 90s.
Close to 2009.
Okay. I'm going to write that down somewhere in here.
There is. But the air conditioning on the other end of the building is
So,
so
why-
it's different down there.
So basically you were outgrowing your space.
Right.
Okay. But when you designed it with certain things in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Turkey supper, Sunday school, because you had to reconfigure all that other stuff over there, too.
Right.
It's not like you built this and turned this into classrooms,
No.
right? Okay. One thing I want to point out, I'll go ahead and point it out now, rather than wait later on in your history. It's really interesting to me to hear how y'all planned the building for mission. Some churches would go into building campaigns, and it's kind of purely self-serving. but you made your building serve your mission. Turkey supper, Sunday school, scouts, air-conditioned space for worship, right? I mean, in a way, it's kind of amazing that this one project resulted in like 3 different benefits for y'all.
There's also
How-
a place for the youth to gather and play games.
Yeah, games. I mean, there's, again, the lines on the floor. I always wondered what the lines on the floor were about because they're in the carpet. I mean, it's not like it's painted on or attached. Like, that's strange. But that's interesting. Because, again, as your ministry context changes, you're going to have to think about how can we use our building for the sake of mission. It's all about the mission. Remember. Okay? All right, so the fellowship hall, whose idea was it?
My recollection is it was Clarence Huntsberger and Jim Shelley and Barry Isett.
Oh, okay.
Barry Isaac's the architect, he designed it.
Who
Yeah,
designed it?
Barry Isett.
No way.
Yeah,
He's an architect,
Okay.
or an engineer, yeah.
Yeah. I know he's an architect contractor guy.
Yeah, he has a,
And you, Barry Huntsberger?
no, Clarence
Clarence
Huntsberger. Yeah, we have some Huntsberger descendants here.
Yeah, right. And Pastor Shelley.
Yeah.
Was it a tough sell? What do y'all remember? Was it hard to make the pitch?
Yeah, I remember having to go visit 10 different families to ask them to make a financial commitment going forward to help pay for this building.
Was that hard?
Yeah, I'm not real good at asking people for money. At least I wasn't then. I got better at it as it went along.
So what else? Other comments, other memories? Who remembers that time? Other people? Yeah, Gail.
we had just joined, and I remember, I don't know if I was, what committee I was on, but I recall having to contact people and talk about this, and I was like a brand new member. But the other thing I remembered is that it was part of a larger picture of someday making this worship space, and I remember there were other plans, and this was like step 2 maybe.
Yeah. Before I get to the big plan that I found in the pastor's office, a couple things I want to ask about this. So it was hard personally asking people for money. Was it hard to actually get the money?
No.
Okay. Why not?
We have some kind of commitment.
It was like a pledge commitment.
Yeah, I mean, I think people believed in the mission.
Okay. Can you say that really loud, Dennis?
People believed in the mission.
If you believe in the mission, the money will come. No, seriously. If you don't, it's going to be pulling teeth. Truly. And again, that's kind of a testament to the success of this campaign in the wider context of your ministry. If people are on board with it, then they're going to say, yeah, okay, they will contribute something for the sake of the treasure in a field. For the sake of that pearl of great price, people will give of themselves. And that's what the mission is. That's the vision. And, wow, I mean, awesome. When you think about it, my hunch is y'all probably paid it off ahead of time. No, really, and you want to know how I was able to guess that? Because you can hear it. You can hear it. Because I've seen other churches who go into building campaigns and they make perfect sense, but they're left like, oh, we only raised half of what we thought we could raise, and oh, we're still, years away from paying off the mortgage. That tells you something, right? All right. And this is a part of your heritage. It's part of your history. It's a part of the character of the place. For those of you who joined after 1987, you're like, well, I don't get it anyway. It's a big deal, right? But it's a part of the DNA of the system. Okay? And Marnita, who's pretty new, will hear stories and will get a vibe about how important this space is from Gwen or Connie or Cheryl. And you'll wonder, well, gee, like, why is the fellowship hall so important? Make sense? Have you felt that before? Boom! Yeah, okay. All right, so moving on then, turkey suppers. How were y'all able to kind of increase the ability to do turkey suppers because of the fellowship hall? Yeah, no.
It made it a little easier to do it.
A lot more efficient.
More efficient, but not necessarily more turkeys.
More comfortable
What's the kitchen?
with the air conditioning or, you know, the heat or
True.
whatever. To remember that.
And actually,
Early
at
days
that
of
time, we were
shutters
having
and
two
everything.
suppers. We were having a spring supper and a fall supper.
Oh,
Yeah,
no way.
Mhm.
yeah. Chicken and
Yep,
ham.
we were doing
Well,
chicken at one
It
and
was chicken at first, and then we
Yes,
added the
and
ham.
then we had.
No,
Thanksgiving in April.
No, it was a Mother's Day.
It was,
one.
yeah, it was the Saturday before Mother's
It
Day.
was a Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day weekend.
Okay. Mom doesn't have to cook.
Oh, yeah, she did. That was the next day. This was the day before.
Okay. All right.
So Mom was exhausted for Mother's Day.
Okay. So that was 87. Anything else from the late 80s?
We
So
had
when did they stop doing the two turkey dinners?
the,
Was there a reason why they stopped doing that? Was it not successful during the other half of the year?
it wasn't as successful as the turkey supper,
Mhm.
and it's still a lot of
a lot of
work.
work, yeah.
And so essentially what we did is there were probably 30 of us, or 20 families, I'm gonna say. So we would net roughly, we'd net about $2,000 from the chicken and ham supper. And there were 20 families that said they'd pony up $100 to get their week back. And so, and that worked pretty well for about 6-7 years, because people kept giving and it's fallen off. And quite honestly, I'm one of the people, and I probably have not given to it in 10 years. But it's a lot of work. Yeah, I mean, I was here half a day Thursday, all day Friday, all day Saturday, and then people came in the next week and did the final cleanup.
And it was every bit as much work as the fall supper that we.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just different food.
Just in the spring.
And we
Didn't it
made,
probably stop around?
we made a lot of the food. Like, we had chow chow that was made. I mean, that's a lot of work making chow chow. Caramel, all the caramels were made here.
Didn't that stop around 2000 or 2001, somewhere in that
It was,
ballpark?
I think it was 2002 or 2003.
Can y'all hear? Can y'all hear, Nicole?
Are you able to hear what we're
Are
doing?
you able to hear?
I can hear bits and pieces. I can hear best when you're speaking, Pastor, because you're facing me.
Right. I wonder if, Smokey, if we should move it back a little bit so the microphones on the laptop are closer to the speakers. Or, I'm looking for my phone actually, because I could set it up as a speaker on the Zoom call, and they would be able to hear better. So, we should be fine, and if the battery gets low, then we'll plug it in. But I could go ahead and set it up kind of there in the middle. They'll have an easier time.
Because of the sun.
The microphone in the laptop is pretty good, and they'll have an easier time hearing. My hope, that's my hope at least. Here. There we go. So you don't have like a cushiony chair to absorb all the sound. All right. So another thing to kind of point out, I mean, that was a good question that Tim asked. It's Tim, right?
Yeah.
You know, when did it die off and why? You're going to look at your heritage and there's a temptation. So let me back up a little bit. First, I dug through your records, found average worship attendance. And what's interesting is how it's pretty much stable for 30 years. It's not until about 2010, 2011, 2012 that you get a dip, and that dip kind of stays there. Okay?
We showed up. That was it. We showed up there.
Blame the show. It's all your fault. That's it.
Let the record show.
So we're meeting nervous.
So if we drown you guys off, then we're good?
That's funny. And now I've lost my train of thought.
Attendance.
Yeah, so a lot of churches will get kind of anxious if there's not growth. You do stuff, and you do stuff because you want to grow. Well, if you do stuff and you don't grow, well, then something must be wrong. Not necessarily. Some things just need to die, and that's okay. It's okay. All right? The ham and chicken supper in the spring, it died. Why? Because there wasn't the energy for it. And that's fine. You turn your energy elsewhere. And you can sort of see that in your history. Things will come, things will go. Things will go up, things will go down. Now, what's interesting about the fellowship hall building part is you do not have an increase in attendance in spite of the fact you did this big, huge, successful thing. Now, that's kind of interesting, actually. Most churches, when you do a building project, you'll get a bump, usually in a year or two, because the community feels the energy. Make sense? Maybe instead of getting a bump in attendance, what you got was increased energy to keep doing a bunch of other stuff.
We didn't decrease like many did.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, yeah, and like Smokey just said, your attendance is pretty stable. So you get to the early 90s, September Fest, which later becomes June Fest. Why did that come about? What was the inspiration behind September Fest?
It was something I brought from my church.
Okay.
My church I grew up in did a big country fair, and I just thought it'd be a neat idea to do.
Okay. So a country fair idea came from Connie. And Connie, how did you get your idea to get traction? What happened?
Started talking to people about doing it, and people said, sure.
Okay.
So we did it.
If you have a good idea, people will follow. Notice that Connie didn't mention anything about the pastor or council. Right? It's another one of those things that's important for y'all to have a realization about your congregation. How does change come about? Is it top down or is it bottom up? Or is it a little bit of both? What do y'all think?
I think it's a little bit of both.
A little bit of both? Okay. That's good to be aware of because some church systems, it's very clear it's top down. Okay? And when you get your new pastor, you're going to put expectations on your new pastor about whatever it might be. When Pastor Paul arrived, expectations were put on him in comparison to Pastor Shelley, who was here for 32 years. Same thing will happen with the next person. Him or her, they'll arrive and there'll be expectations put on them based on Pastor Chapman and Pastor Shelley. Okay? But in terms of your driving force of your ministry, you can't put all your eggs in one basket, obviously. That's kind of one of those neat things to learn. Treasure old to pull out. Connie had an idea, people got behind the idea happened. I've been in some places where people get a great idea, and I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. I'm the pastor. You should talk to so-and-so and so-and-so. A month later, did you talk to so-and-so and so-and-so? No, I don't know, Pastor. I just don't know if this idea will work. And the expectation was that I would somehow make it happen. You see the difference there? And no matter how much I encouraged this one particular person, it took a year for it to finally happen. When it did, it was like, yay, how come we didn't have, why did it take so long? So anyway, all right. June Fest, September Fest, county fair type thing, it'd be fun. Bring in the community, maybe? Because who are you doing it for? Community. All right, and then you have a whole bunch of stuff that happened in 1994. First, contemporary service that started on Saturday evening, is that right?
I think it was. I don't know.
I thought it was on a Sunday night, but I could be mistaken.
Sunday night?
I think it was a Sunday night. But so it bounced, it was on Sunday night, Saturday night, Sunday at, was it 8:30?
Yeah, we did it for a while,
Squeeze it
8:30.
between the-
Yeah, those were fun.
Jim would preach over there and then run across over here and preach here.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
and we
Okay.
changed the service around so that the offering happened before the sermon. And so our offering song, I remember at least 3 times, we had to do like extra verse and chorus on the offering song because Jim wasn't over yet from the 8 o'clock service.
Wow.
Yeah, that was cutting it close.
Okay.
Yeah, we'd sent, actually, I think we sent Mark out to scout him out, to try to drag him over quicker.
Said, okay, hello, time to come over. All right. Okay, y'all also started the 8 o'clock first spoken service. Again, you're adding worship opportunities, but you really don't get a bump in attendance. And yet, those are things that have kind of lived on. What was the initial response to contemporary worship?
Our families.
Friends and family, yeah.
In other words, not great.
Not many friends.
Yeah.
It was kind of meh.
Yeah.
How many of your family's going to be here this Sunday?
Yeah.
The church was willing to allow it, or to, to have it, but it did not stir a lot early on.
I would say
Okay.
not until it became that third Sunday thing. Then it started to infiltrate and be more accepted by the congregation with attendance and enjoyment.
So why was that special? What made the fact that it was on a third Sunday?
Because that was, if you were going to come to church at 10:15, that's what you were getting served.
Period.
Period. I mean, now, and with that being said, there are people that on the third Sunday of the month would go to the 8 o'clock service because they couldn't stand the noise. But it became, once it was, for lack of a better term, shoved down people's throats, they seemed to enjoy it.
There were people too that came only the third Sunday, not a lot of people, but
There
I
were,
know
yeah, there were quite a few that would show up
only
on the
for the
third Sunday at 10:15. They do the 8 o'clock service every other time.
Okay, so I don't know if you can hear that, Nicole, but basically what Dennis is saying is once it became like the only offering on a particular Sunday a month, then people are like, oh, okay, yeah, I kind of like this. Oh, this is pretty good. That's basically it?
Yep.
Okay. Again, it's kind of interesting. You really don't get a bump in attendance. But again, you have these ideas that kind of carry forward. Handbell choir begins. So the contemporary service, I heard that Pastor Shelley went to a conference and came back with the idea. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I remember that, him and Judy.
Okay.
Okay. That's kind of interesting. Now, how did he make this happen? So he goes to the conference, but just because your pastor goes to a conference and comes back with great ideas doesn't mean the congregation's going to follow. How did Pastor Shelley make it happen? His idea.
Again, meeting that I recall, that
Okay.
people got together to see what the interest might be, and what his ideas were. There were some ideas that didn't happen,
Okay.
but I think that, that's basically what I recall, was that a group of people got together.
Instigated to remove her, and if you will notice when attendance starts to dip, it started slowly, I think, at that point on. Then there were other conflicts,
Yeah.
and attendance continued to go down. And that didn't seem to matter to anybody. That's what I want to say.
Okay. We'll get to that in a second. But I did just want to, I asked about the staff relations thing because you have a bunch of staff people right here in the mid-2000s. And I didn't know if there were any things about the staff that affected necessarily the ministry. Because that's another one of those kind of patterns that can sometimes affect the life of the congregation. Okay. So moving on, New Orleans, Hurricane Katrina, had a lot of people participate in that. Anyone want to comment on that? How many of you went down to Biloxi? Wow, a lot of people. Okay,
35, the first people.
that's cool.
But to me, that's the essence of this congregation, is so many of the things started as someone's idea, not necessarily the pastor.
Yeah,
Someone, and it grew, and that started with Al and Irene, who went down, right when it happened.
Yeah, we went down to Thanksgiving after Katrina. so
Okay.
2 months
Right,
after.
right, and they
With
came
another
back.
church.
Okay.
But you came back and showed us pictures.
oh yeah.
And so many people were moved by that. We had 35 people sign up to go
Wow.
in February. We
It was
went
in
in
February
February.
of the next year, yeah.
We caravaned down, it was all planned where we stopped, and we stayed at a church down there. But that started from, like Connie's idea started, and this person and that person, that's how that started. And to me, that's one of the beauties of this church, is that it just kind of grows on its own. People pick things up and move with them. Nobody has to be told, well, you have to do this or you have to do that.
Yeah.
That's how a lot of the great things have happened that I see. So,
That's really important to remember. And to kind of draw.
yeah, and I don't know, like I remember you showing it in Sunday school, or was it between Sunday school and church? I don't know, did they get permission? I don't know how some of the things happened, but they happened. And just like there's signs on the doors.
No, when we came back, we told Jim about it, and he said, why don't you
Yeah, presented.
make a presentation?
And we had people that were from outside the church that went on.
The
There's
first
two
year,
guys I worked with on the, and
Yeah, the
you know,
guys
on
from the
roof, like,
roofer, there was a carpenter and a
Yeah.
roofer.
That were friends.
I remember the
they
dad
were
went,
friends with somebody that went.
Like friends.
Wanda Haverly. Okay.
and I remember this girl who was wasting her talents building when she is a pharmacist and I was a nurse, and we had no clue what these meds were. And I said, wait a minute, one of our people is a pharmacist. We need her. And we pulled her off of the carpentry crew.
That's fantastic.
So she can do that too.
Had open your mouth, did you, Lord?
Nurses by day dispense pills by
Oh,
night.
that was, I just remember because the doctor would say, well, they need this. Well, this didn't exist, but maybe a form of it that was similar existed.
Huh.
We were only nurses. We follow orders.
So, I don't want to say this is a buzzword, but you could call it a permission-giving environment. Irene had an idea. She went to Pastor Shelley. Pastor Shelley said, oh, that sounds like a good idea. Go for it. Who gives permission? Is it council, the pastor, a system? Is it the matriarchs and patriarchs? Is it, the Jones family that has all the money? Right? You see a little bit of everything in certain places. But, how does the permission-giving environment work? Just something to think about. And if you can create permission giving, then you're going to get those ideas. And people are going to run with them. Now, if no one runs with your idea, like you could have gone, like Pastor said, oh, Irene, that's awesome. And you could have shown your slides or whatever. And people would have been like, yeah, okay, that's kind of cool. Anyone interested?
It was devastating.
And you might get like, 3 people. Well, all right, okay.
I was shocked. I didn't think it would go anywhere, but, in a couple of months, we had that many people going, and then the next year, and the next year. I think it went for 3 years, right?
Yeah.
Third year wasn't as many.
And again, like with the ham and chicken dinners, eventually people start to say no, and that's okay. But if you don't have a permission-giving environment, or if it's not kind of aware of what it looks like, then nothing's going to happen. Does that make sense? All right, moving on. But again, it's kind of neat. You guys wrote in some different things that started. A knitting group started. You did 40 days of purpose, community days. That's a Rick Warren thing. Small group Bible studies kind of flow out of that. Again, it's an example of sort of spiritual growth. Pastor Shelley retires in 2010. Now, I understand he announced his retirement a year in advance. Is that right? Okay. Now, was that a surprise, or were people like shocked? Or why now? Or we knew you were going to retire eventually, but we were hoping maybe it'd be in 3 or 4 years. What was the response to Pastor Shelley's announcement?
I think there were some people that were devastated, and some people that were like, oh, it's about time.
Okay.
And I don't know what the percentages of that.
She's
A mixed bag?
Yeah.
So, some people are really sad. I don't want to say some people were happy, but some people were kind of like, okay. And that's normal, by the way. You've been here, what, 30-something years? 32? I mean, at some point, people start to think, well, you're going to have some people who are saying, well, about time. You're going to have other people who are saying, no, not yet. You're going to get both. There was a guy in Pottstown who retired after 51 years. Wow. And the council wept. Now, the sad part is he only gave him a month and a half's notice. During the pandemic. So, I mean, as an interim minister, I sit there and I wonder, on the one hand, you guys have, in my opinion at least, you've shown in 20 years or so, you've kept your ministry fairly fresh. Every few years or so, there's something. New, different, whatever. There's things going on. It's not like it got stale. Maybe it did get stale. Maybe these folks thought, well, the ministry's getting kind of stale.
And also with Jim leaving, Judy went too, of course, and she was involved with Sunday school classes. She was involved with retreats, choir. So she was pretty involved.
Right.
Well, I think also in those 5 years leading up to Jim retiring, and maybe even longer than that, Marietta was wearing a lot of different hats, and she was pretty good at it. She really did have a way of motivating people.
And that was one of the things, that I heard on Sunday was, how did this happen? And a lot of it was Marietta following up with people. I also heard Pastor Shelley, someone shared on Sunday that Pastor Shelley had a way of doing one-on-one recruitment, one-on-one relationship with people to get them involved in stuff. I heard he wasn't a great preacher. I heard that from people. Okay, no. All right. Okay. But another person said, but if he knows your story, then you can know how he's preaching to you. Right? That's where that personal peace makes a difference, even though you might not be a great preacher. Does that make sense?
He may not have been a great preacher, but he was a wonderful pastor.
Okay.
He's not as good as you.
Already?
Forget it. Wrap it up.
So Pastor Greenwald. I know Pastor Greenwald. I know her personality. I know that she can ruffle feathers. Put it politely. What's y'all's thoughts about Pastor Greenwald?
I like Pastor Greenwald.
You liked Pastor Greenwald.
Yeah, I have no problems with it. She's black and white, and that's the kind of person I am. It's yes or it's no. I'm not somebody that can follow grays. So for me,
Okay.
I liked her. She baptized my son.
Okay. So some people liked her, some people didn't like her. I saw a head shake in the back. I'm not gonna pick on anybody.
And not only did she baptize my son, she was gracious enough that I went to her and said, could Marietta also be there? And she said yes.
Okay.
I mean, she could have said no.
That's a really important thing with, it's not really so much an issue obviously with Pastor Paul, who's way out in Illinois, but the relationships between a former pastor and the congregation. Some people interpret it as if a sharp cutoff, never see them again, they're dead to you, kind of thing. No. That's just too strict. On the other hand, though, you don't want the former pastor, secretly showing up at the weekly Bible study in someone's house. No. That's where you go to this current pastor, and like you did, you say, hey, can so-and-so participate? And then you let the current pastor say, well, okay, we'll put some boundaries around it to keep boundaries. That's good. Sometimes that happens, sometimes that doesn't. Sometimes they show up. I'm like, oh, what? Like, you're officiating this funeral? Like, yeah.
Nicole has something.
Yeah, Nicole.
Yeah, I just wanted to say we joined the church when Pastor Greenwald was the pastor, and we loved her. She also baptized. No, she didn't baptize one. No, but she was wonderful. We really enjoyed her.
Okay.
I second what Denise said.
Okay. So I've heard a little bit of everything. Again, this is kind of one of those examples of something where you have two different stories and they're both true. That is important to remember with things that cause conflict. All right? Because personalities often get involved. And it's just, y'all just need to just be aware. It doesn't mean that the other person's wrong or whatever. Both stories can be true.
And
Okay?
that seems to be a constant in the environment, in the church environment, where you have...
It's a constant in any kind of system. Family systems, like I think back to Thanksgivings with my mom's family and her sisters and brothers and great aunt. I mean, being a kid, you just see it, right? And then 20 years later, my sister's like, well, grandma, da-da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, that's not how I remember it. Okay? So, again, good and bad, mixed bag. Kingdom of Heaven is like a mixed bag. You're going to get good and bad. The point isn't to dwell on the difference. You dwell on the difference, you're going to get caught up in the conflict and rehash it all. Well, I love this person. Well, that person was the most awful person in the world. And meanwhile, Jesus is tapping us on the shoulder and saying, pearl of great price. There's a treasure hidden in a field. Treasures old and new. Right? Jesus is saying, Kingdom of Heaven, the Kingdom of Heaven at St. Luke's is a mixed bag. But good that we know it now. And oh, by the way, don't judge. Again, the parable, it's interesting about the parable, The angels are the ones at the end of time separating it out. We'll all be up at the pearly gates. And then we'll be like, oh, that's why that happened. Or, oh, I didn't think that was that good at the time. You know what I mean? Does that make any sense? Or they just might, or we might be in the pearly gates and say, wow, why'd we obsess about that? Right? Now the thing with Marietta, I know there are lots of strong feelings about Marietta. I've heard them from a variety of people. The thing I've heard a good bit is there was worries that she was kind of, her fingers were in too many pots. Council tried to rein her in. She was sleeping in her office. Council said you can't do that, but she did it anyway. Right? I mean, none of these are secrets, right? Okay? And so there's the narrative that Pastor Arlene, one of her jobs was to force Marietta out. I've heard that. And Mary, you've sort of just shared that too. Good or bad, it is what it is now. Right? So again, that's another one of those things where you got two sides of the story, and they're both true. Because one of the questions I asked the Sunday group was, well, how come Pastor Jim? I mean, did people try to set boundaries about what Marietta was doing? Oh, yeah, we tried, no one could do it. Oh, but Arlene was sort of the one who did it. Yeah. Well, okay. All right. Any comments on that? Questions? I know, Alan, you were there on Sunday.
You remember my comment?
No, I don't actually.
Pastor Greenwald had a mission when she got here.
Oh,
And that
okay.
was
Yeah,
to get rid of
I've heard that
Marietta.
too. Yeah.
And she accomplished that.
Yeah. But there were other people who appreciated the fact that she was able to do it, even if the results were disruptive. And that's another thing about churches that get into a pattern. It might not necessarily be healthy long term, but how do you change things up without creating too much disturbance?
Unfortunately, it did create a lot of disturbance with the Sunday school program.
Yeah.
Because people in the Sunday school program at that time loved Marietta. People in choir loved Marietta. And there was a lot of hard feelings because of that.
And so, again, it's an art form, and it's not, I don't see too many examples of it being handled well, of handling stuff like that well. Playing Monday morning quarterback. Is there a way that that could have been handled better? Who knows? And again, you know, this is a part of your history. Other conflicts could fall into the same kind of paradigm or example, right? All right, so I'll call Pastor Paul. I understand from lots of people he was a good preacher. I know Julie. Do you know Julie or Julie? Jewel and Dennis were on the call committee. Who else was on the call?
Irene.
Oh, Irene was on the call. So,
Wesley.
oh, you were on the call committee. My God, half the call committee's here.
Wesley.
Wesley. Carol Wagner was on.
Comments? Anything about this transition?
I think, whoop, sorry, go ahead, Jen.
I kind of felt it was a rush, like we had to get someone in there quick. I don't know if Greenwald wanted to get moving on, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Because there really wasn't that many choices, which I guess, I don't know if there were that many applications or whatever, but.
Well, you know, she did not complete the transition. Pastor Greenwald left.
Oh.
Oh, that's right.
And then we had,
Pastor, started with Q.
Quincy.
Quincy.
Elaine Quincy.
But I thought that was supposed to happen.
You choose a bridge pastor.
Yeah, she was a bridge.
Right.
How long was Pastor Greenwald here?
Too long.
Like a year and a half.
Too long, not long enough. Too long, not long enough. Great taste, less filling.
more than a year and a half.
Okay. And then Pastor Quincy, how long was she
Did she get called
here?
to do something else, or what did she?
Pardon me?
Why did Pastor Greenwald go?
Because we had the call committee up and running,
Yeah, I think that was.
and that was, that's, the process is that once the call committee has been formed, the interim has done their job. And if there's a need for the interim at another church, they will move that interim and get you a bridge pastor.
That is correct.
So Pastor Quincy was a
Yeah, it was all part of, it was a plan.
So the transition from Pastor Shelley's last Sunday to Pastor Paul's first Sunday was about, what, 2 years? And it still felt rushed.
About 2.25.
Wow.
No, I'm sorry, it was about 2 years.
But Deneen, you're saying it felt rushed.
No,
Or
no,
Jen,
no, I did.
you were saying it felt rushed.
Well, the call committee doesn't start, as you know, in this
Yeah.
case, right away. So it's
Right.
probably a year or less.
Yeah, it was a year and a half before the call committee was formed.
Yeah, so, and there were 3 names, and they went to see them. Mind you, I never knew who they were, but I know that Dennis would go to a church with Wesley, and they'd act like father and son.
Yeah.
And they, yeah, Wesley was a kid.
Call committee, incognito.
Yeah.
Jewel was on the call committee.
Yeah, Jewel would dye her hair black and wear contacts.
Yeah, so
Yeah, the one church I went to, they thought I was a widower, and some of the ladies there started hitting on me.
That is so funny. That is really funny.
did you take your ring off?
I can't believe that. Was that specifically in Spinnerstown, Dennis?
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, but Michelle's like, who was that hitting on you? I bet I know them.
Yeah, I heard a story about Spinnerstown. Well, that was.
Yeah, it was at Spinnerstown, yes. And it's like, yeah, I'm good.
She's
We're
very
fine.
Oh, you know the
She was really married, but yeah, she would hit on.
You knew the person. Oh, that's funny.
Virginia, that's it.
So that's really interesting. That's the first I've heard that, by the way.
What,
It's the first time?
No, the call process felt rushed.
Was it pressure, Jen? Maybe not rushed, but did you feel like maybe there was pressure?
Well,
in the
I guess the
selection?
one thing that sticks out in my head is, I think we lost our organist then too, in the process of that, and she pulled in somebody, was like, oh, we found this person, and let's hire her. Like, I just felt like there wasn't, and then when we got her in here, she really didn't even know how to play the, or I don't know, I just didn't think she didn't even,
Who was
I
it?
think there was a pressure thing.
She was only here for a couple months.
Yeah, she was only here for a very short time, but she did not know. And she didn't even allow, I thought, for the whole call committee to listen to, like, sit in and listen, or, I don't know, I just felt like there wasn't, she just wanted to get somebody in there,
Oh, so not for
and then we found out that it didn't last very long, whoever that was, I forget.
Disorganization, maybe, Jen? Do you think it was disorganized? I remember you and I stepped up to do a lot of things in the beginning.
Yeah.
Like to talk, to let our congregation know what the process was. Remember we made flyers and things like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, this
It felt a
this
little
process is
disorganized.
very much more transparent, I want to use that jargon.
Okay.
And more, you know, sort of pointing the way rather than just,
Yeah.
this is what we're doing.
Yes, this is
that were interested in doing it, and we started from there.
And the organist at the time, I think,
Yes.
was, the organist or music person at the time was willing to play. And I'm sure somehow Smokey got in, and he has a background with bands.
Okay.
And-
So Pastor Shelley had meetings to build consensus, basically. Was Patricia Nice your organist back then?
No.
What was it, Wolf?
Judy Wolf.
Yes,
She was an intern
Judy Wolf, that's right.
for the seminary.
Ah,
Pulled that under.
Yeah.
okay. Okay, all right. Again, notice sort of the pattern. If you, not even if you necessarily want to find a pattern, an idea and how do the ideas happen. All right, so moving on. Marietta was hired in 95, hired to do worship and music stuff, right? Initially?
Yeah, she was hired as the music director.
Yeah. I heard lots of stories about Marietta. We'll get to those later. I understand she was a force of nature and very driven and did lots of stuff. Like I said, we'll talk about Marietta later on. But she started out as worship and music. When did she get into Christian ed stuff?
Was she the organist?
Yeah, she was the music director.
Oh, okay.
So when did she get into Christian ed stuff?
She was there in 97 because she got me involved in it.
In Christian ed?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So somewhere in here,
She continued as Christian ed throughout her tenure.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what?
She continued as Christian
Yeah.
education throughout her tenure.
But she wasn't the staff person for Christian ed then, because when I came, Sandy Huth was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And after Sandy left, I think, was when Marietta was given that joint title.
But she was super active in it.
She was
though.
active in everything.
She recruited
There too, right?
like every.
What's that?
Sandy Adams did it too.
Yep.
She did it after
That's
Sandy
right,
Huth, I think.
that's right.
So Lori, how did Marietta recruit you? What was that like?
Well, no, I brought my children here who were very young, and I hung around with them the first few weeks to make sure they were comfortable. And she said, "Gee, you're really good at working with kids. How about if you help out in Sunday school?"
Okay. How many times did you say no before she forced you to say yes?
I didn't say no.
Okay. But I've heard that that's kind of how Marietta worked. She would ask people and kind of follow up. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jen, you were going to say something?
Well, I taught in Sunday school too, and it was Marietta who came to me, but I was helping out in the classroom with, and I'm not sure if I have the lady's name right now. Is it Brandy Rose?
Randy.
Randy Rose.
Oh.
And she ended up passing, and she came to me and said, "Would you take over the classroom?" And that's,
I mean, they.
how many years later?
She means Naomi. Yeah, Randy Rose is still alive.
Not Naomi, it was,
Randy's still, yeah.
who was the teacher?
What class, what age?
I remember that, Jim.
Not Mary Sullivan.
Oh, Mary Sullivan?
She had cancer, and it was treatment, yeah.
That's an old woman, or?
Oh my gosh, why can't I can't remember her name? I thought it was one of the Roses.
You know this was gonna be?
Just remember there's no right or wrong answer. We're talking about 20-something years ago.
Second, I think it was like, it was kindergarten, first grade, it was a younger classroom.
I do remember that then. because
Yeah,
That's when I was teaching.
Like, we were all in shock that she, and she,
Oh, it's kindergarten.
was it
And-
kindergarten?
Yes. What, who was?
I don't know, that's horrible that I can't remember.
And that's when the youth mission trip started. Was 97 to Ripley, Tennessee, and they've been going on every year since. How many of you have been on a youth mission trip? I think more of y'all have been on one. I saw like 2 tiny little hands go up. All right, Charlotte, you want to comment on those?
Love them. It's great seeing the youth so invigorated and singing and working with the residents. I'm not going this year, and I missed it last year, of course, everybody did.
Yeah.
Yeah, it felt good coming home after going on a mission trip.
Would have been better without Kevin.
I didn't work with that. Which was really nice. You were split up. You didn't work with your church. You went and worked with other churches, which was good. So you had to really open up.
So when the teenagers were there, the teenagers are working with adults from other churches?
Yeah, and you have others from other churches.
Oh, no way, that's kind of neat.
It is. It's really neat.
That's really neat. And so y'all have done that every year, other than the pandemic doesn't count.
Yeah.
You've done it every year since. Candace, you said you've gone. You want to comment on it?
Yeah, it was, when I came in 2018 in mission trip, I think that was the Charlotte, New York trip. And it was already running, and it was probably coming up in like a couple months from the time that I took on the role. I had no intention on going because I didn't even know if I would have vacation days. At the time I was volunteering, I just wanted to help out because there was a need. And it amazed me how the kids, the youth, have been doing it for so many years. They were so responsible, and really they taught me the ropes. They would tell me, okay, so this is when we make the shirts, or this is when we wake up in the morning, and this is how they organize the group. And whenever, they amaze me that whenever someone new comes into the fold, because you just don't know what to expect when you haven't done it. And the youth, they do such a good job with making everyone feel comfortable and welcomed and heard and seen, and you can't be uptight there. Like you just automatically fall in, and it's a wonderful experience.
That's neat. Nicole, I know you're on there. Have you gone? I know Brendan's gone, right? On mission trips?
I have not, no. But Logan went, and so did Brennan. So this will be just their second year going.
Okay. Cool. All right. So that's again another one of your treasures, old and new. Because think of the commitment it takes. Raising the money every year has been hard to raise the money. Some years maybe, but probably the money shows up somehow, right? That's cool. So now I understand your Sunday school was booming in the late 90s into the early 2000s. Interestingly enough, you still don't get a bump in worship attendance. What do y'all make of that?
I think people are willing to send their kids to Sunday school and get confirmed because that's the same thing they did. So they're like, this is what you do. You go to Sunday school, you go through the process, you get confirmed.
So the kids will get dropped off and the parents don't come to church?
There was kids that were dropped off and the parents never came to church. Am I wrong with that?
No, there's a lot of kids that were dropped off.
Okay.
So do y'all notice that if your ministry could be, child-focused isn't the right word. I can't think of a better way, I can't think of a good way to put it. But notice that you had excellent kind of children's ministry stuff, but it didn't translate into growth in worship attendance. I hear all the time, we need young families. Well, you had a bajillion young families, but they didn't stay.
We couldn't get them to go across the street.
To the old building?
Yeah.
Oh, now that's interesting. Do you think they would have stayed if you had one big gigantic building?
No.
No.
No, that was just an expression. We couldn't get them to go across it. They dropped their kids off for Sunday school.
Oh, okay.
And they got all their churching in, and then they take them home. They didn't stay for the service.
Okay.
I mean, maybe that was part of it.
I think the other thing is, we had big vacation Bible schools at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, like 100 kids.
Okay.
And my perception of that was, Marietta called, a lot of those are people that we'd never had here before.
Okay.
Marietta called them relentlessly.
Oh.
And invited them to church.
Okay.
So they weren't really church families.
But how did she get their names to call them?
From Bible school, Vacation Bible School, which was more trendy then than it is now.
After
I think.
Bible school, then she called the
Oh,
family.
she
Yeah,
got
they
them out to
signed up and
Bible
registered and came to Bible
school and then had their
school.
names.
And then in September, she was like,
Okay, come to Sunday, we're Sunday
Yeah.
school starting now, blah, 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 okay. And the kids probably said, oh, we like Bible school, we want to get. I could see that.
So, I mean, just notice that again, when we get to the present, with the dip in attendance, Sunday school shrinking, again, I've heard people share that anxiety with me since I've been here, okay? And it's a reality. If you say to yourselves, oh, if only we had kids in our Sunday school like we did 15, 20 years ago, the reality is it really didn't grow your worship. In which case, maybe you need to rethink the question. If you want to try to regrow your worship, and adult volunteers and all that other stuff, yeah, Paul?
Did you look into, since it stayed like that, was it because maybe the old people were dying and stuff like that at the same time as you're trying, you know what I'm saying?
Well, but there's still, I mean, maybe.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's an older congregation when we got here, and, you know.
Okay. So there might have been growth, but not necessarily net growth. But either way, you might need to, it might be helpful to kind of reframe the question as, okay, yeah, we want young families, but what are we going to offer their parents? That might be a different question. You see what I mean? If you get the parents, you're going to get the kids. You got the kids, but that didn't mean you're going to get the parents.
I know there was a lot of youth nights. I don't know if it was you, Candace, or me, and the parents would drop the kids off, even parents that didn't belong. And Candace would invite them, you know, tell them about Sunday worshiping a lot, but that didn't,
So again, I'm just kind of pointing it out. My take could be wrong. I don't know. But I just think it's something to think about.
I think in the early 2000s also, I'm not quite sure when, we did Alpha in an effort to try to get...
You did Alpha?
Yep.
No way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did Alpha.
How many times did y'all do Alpha?
And purpose-driven life.
Maybe twice. I'm not sure if it was more than once.
Yeah.
What's Alpha? What's an Alpha?
So it's the Alpha Project. We almost did it in my first call, and we thought about doing it in my second call, actually. The Alpha Project is an adult education program geared for people with no church background, or very little church background, for adults. It's good, actually, and the material's very good. And it kind of culminates with kind of like an adult confirmation, or baptism if you're an adult and you haven't been baptized. So it's interesting.
Was his name Mickey Gumbel?
Yes.
That did that?
British guy.
Yeah.
So y'all did Alpha somewhere in here.
Early 2000s. I'm not quite sure when, but it was in that.
Okay. Sunday school booming. You build the education wing. Tell me about that. Whose idea? How did it come about? Why then?
We needed more Sunday school space.
Notice it's right after Sunday school.
Okay. Was it a hard sell?
Not really. I don't think so.
Not really. Okay. Was it ever discussed about like doing like a daycare, preschool, anything like that?
We had a Head Start in this room back in the, I'm going to say, early 90s.
Right? That's how we ended up with the playground stuff. Then it started one in it.
Maybe 2 years or so, roughly.
How many?
It had to be.
It was like 91 to
It was-
93 or 4.
We joined in
When I was
98
in
and it was still here then.
Yeah, it seemed like it was a lot, because all the stuff would be
In the back.
Yeah.
in the back and closed up.
All the toys.
Yeah, we were practicing.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, you know, the question,
They stopped.
if it's serving your mission, people will contribute to it. How can the education wing further your mission? You know, you've got all this space. It came up in council last night, as a matter of fact, because the air conditioning units aren't working over there. So then the question is, how much money do we put into the air conditioning units based on how often the space is used? You notice how the use of the space influences real-life concrete decisions about a piece of air conditioning equipment. People might think, oh, air conditioning equipment, how's that touched you in your ministry? The decisions you make about air conditioning influences the use of the building, which influences your mission, right? I can tell you one thing, if you had 80 kids in there with a preschool, that air conditioning would have been replaced within a day, okay? Because the state, if you have any kind of type of licensure with the state, it can't get above 72 degrees, interestingly enough. Found that out at Grace in Pottstown, because they have a preschool. And their something failed. Boiler? I don't know. Anyway, the state has certain regulations about, you know, climate control and kids. Can't get too cold, can't get too hot. All right, so the education wing was built. It's almost paid off, right? Like how long left?
About a year or 2 years left on that, but then we still have to pay ourselves back.
Okay.
So that's quite a bit, yeah, that's about 150,000.
Oh, okay. So you borrowed from investments.
Yeah, we took a mortgage and we borrowed from investments.
Okay. But the mortgage will be paid off in about a year or two. And then you can start paying off the borrowing from investments. Okay. One thing I didn't ask about on Sunday, do you have a history of utilizing investments for the sake of ministry?
I think that was the first.
Yeah, that was
the first.
That was controversial.
Very controversial.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Education wing built again. You don't really get a bump in attendance. But you have space for Sunday school. Anyone remember what it was like to do Sunday school after the education wing got built?
After?
Yeah. Was it like, yeah, I can't believe how it takes long?
That was great.
When, before the education bill was built, our class, which was a pretty big class at the time, adult Bible class, met in the, we call it the Welcome Center. At that time it was called the Schoolhouse. That's where we met, so, and that room was used for a lot of other things.
Okay.
A lot of classes of the kids' classes were doubled up, and that wasn't necessary after the new education wing was built. So it was like, yay.
Okay.
Yeah, the nursery was over in the church, so the
yeah.
parents, you'd have to take the little kids over to the nursery, because that's.
Wait, the nursery is in the sanctuary?
Yeah,
In the basement.
In the basement.
Oh, wow.
With the crickets.
So if you had kids in the Sunday school room,
Kids in the basement.
but you wanted to go to an adult Bible study, you would have to drop off your nursery school kid in the basement.
Yep.
That doesn't sound right.
In the dungeon.
Moving closer to Philly, aren't you?
In the basement that was hand dug with shovels.
We tied them up humanely.
Yeah, I know, yeah. I've heard parts of that. All right, so things are kind of moving along. Youth mission trips, everything kind of plugging along. Marietta, kind of by force of personality, getting involved in stuff. The Murrays were hired as youth director in 2005. Is that right? That sound about right?
Yeah, that's what the sign says.
So here's a question I didn't really ask the other day. How did the staff work with each other? Was there a pattern to that? You got Marietta, Pastor Jim, you've got the Murrays, youth directors, other worship person. I'm sorry, what? Oh, and Audrey was in the office. Any comments and anything leap out during this period about kind of staff relations with each other?
I think for the most part they got along. during that period. Except that Marietta was pretty strong-willed, and if she wanted something a certain way,
Okay.
she pretty much got it.
So Marietta kind of had her way, and things, so is it fair to say that things got along fine as long as Marietta got her way? Or is that stating it too strongly?
I think it's a little too strong.
Okay.
But
I think Jim was content and felt confident that it was
Okay.
handled well.
Okay, all right. So Pastor Shelley was comfortable handing things over to Marietta. And then Marietta would just like, great, I get to do this, I get to do that, I get to do that.
And for the most part, I think part of the reason why, my perception, why Pastor Shelley was okay with that was it kind of worked for a long time.
Sure.
You know, there were always, you know, some things
Yeah.
that maybe people questioned that she did, but she got results.
And that's kind of an interesting thing to notice. There might be things in the system that from the outside might look like, well, that's probably not healthy. But if it's not rocking the boat, okay. Or you get results, well, okay, all right. The system kind of adapts to whatever works for the system. And it's really interesting around conflict, by the way. If the system doesn't like conflict, it'll tolerate bad behavior because the system's more scared of conflict than confronting bad behavior. That make sense? Because to a certain degree, you know, when Marietta left, I mean, that's kind of one of those things that probably maybe happened. Pastor Greenwald, okay, Arlene, the interim, precipitated some conflict within the congregation because Marietta, no one could rein her in.
I would like to take exception to that. I don't feel that that's
Okay.
a relationship, at least that some of us have with her.
Okay, great. Mary.
Yes.
Yeah, you want to say more?
Not really. That's basically what I'm here to assess tonight, is where this is going to flow, so I know what I'm doing. And it seems like you're painting Marietta as a villain.
No, I'm not.
Well, that's what I'm hearing.
No, let me...
She was a strong personality. She did get things done, but there were the people here that loved her.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the conflict that was instigated,
Okay.
I think was...
The way we're doing it.
Yeah, right. No,
That's the way
right. You guys need to understand why we're doing what we're doing.
Right.
And I try to be clear as possible. And of course, you can't communicate it enough, but I try to be clear about why we're doing what we're doing. We're getting up more to the present now, but just to kind of remind you all again why we're doing this. Again, the purpose of this is for the sake of your future, okay? Okay, I've never heard a ringtone like that.
It's a long story.
Moving on. While Irene turns 10 shades red. So, again, the purpose is, where are y'all going now? You're in transition. Where are you going now? Change galore. Now, not everything changes. You did June Fest again. Youth are going on a mission trip. You know, granted there's been a pandemic, so that makes everything weird. Again, the idea is, the big question for y'all in your future, in a transition, is what's your vision, what's your mission, what's your purpose? In order to answer that question, where have you been? What's your treasure, old and new, you want to carry into the future? Why is this stuff important? Why is this motivating to you? Why are you here? All right? There's a question in your ministry site profile that every pastoral candidate will get. And it reads like this. What is your purpose? Why are you here? What is y'all's reason for being? Okay? What's your identity? What makes you tick? What's important to you?
You mean us, the congregation?
The congregation, yes. I should say y'all. Why are y'all here? What's y'all's purpose?
You can just say the congregation.
Yeah, congregation. But anyway, that's a question in your profile that a candidate's going to read. How are you going to put words to paper? Well, the words you put to paper is going to be based on this stuff. What's important? Treasures old and new. That's question number one that you guys are going to be answering. And that'll be sort of like the next step in the process. The other question, what are your assets? How has God blessed you here, in this place, today, now, for the sake of your mission? All right? I've got lots of thoughts about that. I'm sure y'all have lots of thoughts about that. There's lots of evidence for it already in here. Reaching out to the community, all right?
When, do you have the community dinners on there?
Yeah, they started in 2014.
Oh, okay.
And it's, don't tell me, you're Tim,
Yes.
and you're Stiegelman, but I forget your first name.
Jeff.
Jeff, thank you. Jeff Stiegelman works for the fire company, and you guys don't have a fire hall.
Correct.
Hello? Right? I mean, there's not a central place within 2 miles of here other than St. Luke's.
They have used it for their
Pancake
Santa.
Yeah. Yeah, but we were talking before dinner about how wouldn't it be great if you guys had more of a presence, if this could be used more by y'all.
That's what I was saying also.
Yeah.
We were more involved.
Right.
Amongst while Jim was here. And then just all tapered off. We had luncheons and...
But that's my point. My point is, fire halls are like little community centers in communities. I've noticed that around southeastern Pennsylvania, especially in the more rural parts. Well, okay, there isn't one around here, right? Well, there's St. Luke's across the street from the township. You see what I mean? Hundreds of people came through for June Fest. Hundreds of people came through for turkey suppers. 100 people almost come through monthly for the community dinners. You see what I'm saying? Okay? Your mission. What's your mission? Another question in your profile. What are your top 3 mission priorities? Which have accomplished, hold out the greatest chance for growth in your ministry, blah, blah, something like that. You guys need to put words on paper. That's the next step based on this work we're doing tonight. Y'all with me? The next question is, what kind of leader do we need, do we want, will get us there? What are our expectations for our new leader based on where we want to go? Do you hear that part? That's the Build a Pastor survey. Okay? You see what I'm saying? This is the kind of spiritual leader we need. This is the kind of pastor we're looking for because of our mission, because of where we want to go. All right? That clear? That's the process. Once you do your Build a Pastor part of the profile, all the heavy work's done. After that, it's kind of busy work that congregations get bogged down doing and waste their time on. I'm just letting you know now, okay? You do all this work quickly, and then it's like, oh, thank God, we're done. No, you still got to do this, this, and this. Well, but that's busy work. Oh, okay? Don't do that, please. Okay? Just keep it moving. And I'm going to try to keep the transition task force keeping it moving. All right? And that way, hopefully, your call committee will be